For the next 9 minutes, I'm going to be discussing the nature and consequences of social exclusion in the workplace. And then I'm going to end on a bit of a brighter note and talk about 3 ingredients that you can infuse into your workplace in order to hopefully encourage inclusion and discourage exclusion. As we get started here today, I'd like you to take a moment and imagine how you would feel if you experienced any of the following interactions I'm about to describe with your colleagues. So imagine that you see 2 of your colleagues in the middle of a conversation and you approach them to sort of join in, and as soon as you get there, the conversation sort of dies and your colleagues disperse without really giving you an explanation. Imagine that you're sitting at your desk and you witness a group of your colleagues laughing and joking as they head out to lunch, and none of them look in your direction or invite you to come along. Finally, imagine that you get to a meeting on time only to find that everyone has already begun without you, and one of your colleagues sort of casually apologizes to you saying, we thought everyone who was important or necessary had already arrived. Laughter suggests that maybe that happens every once in a while. Each of these examples represent interactions of social exclusion. Social exclusion is any interaction in the workplace where someone comes away feeling as though they've been ignored, avoided, or unacknowledged, or any combination thereof. On the surface, it might not appear as social exclusion is sort of the worst experience you could have in the workplace. We know it's bad, but it's not the worst thing, right? We typically assume that the most toxic forms of social interactions are ones in which we feel belittled or insulted or demeaned in some way, types of mistreatment that are more in line with the notion of workplace harassment. However, a growing body of research in social psychology and as well in organizational behavior has begun to explore how social exclusion is a very unique form of mistreatment. And as a result of this uniqueness, it can actually have a more detrimental impact on our psychological well-being, even compared to being harassed in some circumstances. So in particular, when it comes to social exclusion, we find that employees describe very self-defeating emotions attached to it. So when we ask them, what do you feel when you feel like you've been socially excluded at work? They'll say, I feel invisible, I feel helpless, I feel a sense of sadness. When it comes to harassment, the number 1 emotion we typically hear is anger. In addition, when it comes to being socially excluded at work, employees typically describe their experiences as very ambiguous. They find it really difficult to make sense of what's happening to them, to make sense of why they're being socially excluded. Sometimes they worry that it might just all be in their imagination because it's such subtle social interactions. Also, because social exclusion usually doesn't violate any particular norms or rules, they find it difficult to go to HR or talk to their supervisor about how they're feeling. And when a socially excluded employee talks to their friends and family about their situation, the number 1 piece of advice they tend to hear is, well, you don't go to work to make friends. Just suck it up, do your job, be the best employee you can be, and eventually you'll be acknowledged. That's not the most satisfying advice for someone who feels socially excluded in the workplace. And in particular, social psychology research has uncovered that our reactions to social exclusion are actually evolutionary bound. We have a fundamental need as human beings to feel a sense of belonging and to feel that we're acknowledged by people we rely upon, especially people in the workplace. And as a result of this need, neuroscience research shows that when we're socially excluded, it actually lights up the same areas of the brain as experiencing physical pain. So it's a really detrimental experience. With this sort of background in mind, my colleagues at the University of British Columbia and I decided to empirically test what are the impacts of social exclusion in the workplace, and we also compared those impacts to experiencing harassment. So we conducted 2 studies. In the first, we surveyed people on the internet, so they came from a wide variety of industries and job capacities. And in the second study, we surveyed staff members at a large Canadian university. We asked them, to what extent have you experienced different interactions sort of in line with social exclusion and harassment in the previous 6 months? We found that when it came to social exclusion, employees who felt socially excluded at work felt less job commitment, less job satisfaction. We also found that socially excluded employees reported a much higher number of physiological health symptoms. So they experienced more headaches, back pains, muscle tension, all physiological signs of stress. And they also reported more psychological withdrawal. So they were physically present at work, but they weren't really completely putting their mind into their work. In our second study, we also followed up with employees 3 years later. And we found that socially excluded employees were 27% more likely to quit their job voluntarily within 3 years than non-excluded employees. Importantly, we compared these effects to the effects of harassment. And across the board, we found that social exclusion was a much stronger and detrimental experience than harassment. Harassment was still bad, but it wasn't as bad as social exclusion. And in fact, when we compared the relationships simultaneously, we found no effect for turnover for harassment, even though we found such strong effects for social exclusion. So I mentioned that I would end on a more bright note and talk about how we can sort of encourage inclusion in our workplaces. The theme for this year's conference is Imagine Your Workplace, and I'd like to challenge you to imagine your workplace as one that's inclusive. No one feels socially excluded at work. And the sort of silver lining in all this is while it's sort of subtle interactions that can contribute to feeling excluded at work, it's actually very subtle interactions of inclusion that can help encourage belongingness in your workplace. So seemingly small gestures like knowing someone's name, extending hello, inviting someone to lunch, don't seem like they'd be that impactful, but the research shows that they are. They help employees feel included. It encourages that sense of belonging. When it comes to these 3 ingredients that we need in our organizations to help encourage inclusion, the first is knowledge. So because there's this common misperception that social exclusion isn't the worst thing to happen, we need people to know just how detrimental it could be. When you discuss mistreatment in your workplace, include a discussion on social exclusion. The second important ingredient is interpersonal skills. In particular, enhancing employees' emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence can be cultivated, and it helps contribute to better conflict management, and also it helps employees sort of empathize with their colleagues' experiences. So really important along with knowledge. Knowledge sort of gives us a sense that social exclusion is bad, but it's the social skills that we can turn that knowledge into actual healthy, high-quality relationships in the workplace. The third important ingredient is establishing inclusive norms. This is where leadership comes in and is really important. We need people who are in leadership roles to take an active presence in terms of encouraging inclusion in the workplace. And the importance of this is that it helps create trust amongst employees. When you have a leader that's very inclusive, it encourages other inclusive behaviors, and it builds collective trust. And trust is important because when it comes down to it, social exclusion is bound to happen from time to time in the workplace, right? We're all so busy, we have lots of pressure, and so we're bound to oversee or forget someone. And so when we have that trust, it changes our interpretations of our experiences. We become more forgiving of the experiences we have at work because of it. So with that in mind, if anything I've mentioned here today has resonated with you, I encourage you to explore, how included and excluded do your employees feel in your organization? And if you find that employees are feeling excluded, infuse some of these ingredients to help encourage inclusion. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions and comments throughout today.